Good afternoon and welcome to Eurostar Webinar Week. Our first webinar is presented by Nathalie van Delft, and she will speak about the lessons she has learned from being a casualty simulation victim. This webinar presentation is based on her Eurostar track session on usual testing. My name is Miriam and I will be moderating this webinar. Today's webinar will last approximately 25 minutes with time for questions at the end. If you want to ask a question, use the Q&A button on your live meeting toolbar or press Alt and Q on your keyboard. This webinar will also be recorded and will be available in our webinar archive shortly. When tweeting about this webinar, please make sure you use the hashtag ESConfs, that's ESCONFS, so we can find and answer any questions you may have. So now I will hand you over to Nathalie and we can get started on today's topic. Good morning, Nathalie.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this first webinar of Eurostar Webinar Week. My name is Nathalie van Delft, and online I'm also known as Fantastic. My webinar is about unusual testing, lessons learned from being a casualty simulation victim. There it is. The topic that I will discuss are what is casualty simulation, a familiar software testing process, an example, and lessons learned. So what is casualty simulation? Well, casualty simulation is the simulation of illnesses and traumas to educate and train first responders. It was invented during the Second World War. The medical staff was so bruised by the extensive traumas that they couldn't provide any effective help. So actually they got sick by all the gruesome scenes they saw there. And by practicing on simulated wounds, they got accustomed to the horrors and could help them. In Dutch, the abbreviation is LOTUS, and each LOTUS must have an obligatory first aid certificate before being able to start on a 2-year course to become a LOTUS. In LOTUS, domain knowledge is very important, which is not always the case in regular software testing. So you might know this software testing process. I say it's a software testing process and not the testing process, since there are more than one. In my experience, and in this case, I've used this one as my basis. Each stage is translated to casualty simulation. So let's look into the first one. Preparation and specification. Getting the scenario, making the story, what happened, and what are the learning goals. And the preparation of the moulage. You can think of that the goal of teaching somebody first aid is somewhat different than doing a drill for medical staff, which ought to know how to react to casualties. You can see here I'm putting on the moulage, which is the name of the makeup we use in casualty simulation, and it has to be as real as possible. The more real and the better the test will be. And I see this in end-to-end testing too. And the more real I make a scenario, the better the results will be. So execution. Stay in role and have fun. And the fun part is very important because you play all these misery, and if you really feel miserable, it just won't work, oddly enough. So you have to have fun to play misery very well. Execution is done with observation, or yourself or a team. For example, I give birth in a hospital each week on Wednesday morning. I play a woman in labor distress. This is done in a real delivery room and with full medical staff. Besides that, there's also a team, almost of the same number, of observants of each discipline in the room, which check all actions done. And this is also why, for example, pairing up with another tester is so effective, because you can actually look upon what the other is doing and give a very valuable feedback. So completion, or in my case, evaluation, I find the most underestimated part of software testing. In casualty simulation, this is a very extensive phase where all observed stuff is discussed. For example, in the photograph below, there is an error made. Although we always start with the good points, in this case the very good and continuous support by the first aider you see in the picture, in this case there is also a cost to an error which will cause me to die faster. And you can see in the pink circle, there's a bottle of water. And in this case, I'm in shock, which means I don't have a lot of blood in my primary blood flow left. And if they would give me water, I would just die faster because all my blood vessels from my digestive system would need blood, and yeah, it would be fatal. So this guy is told, okay, maybe you shouldn't have given me water. So an example. A more extensive example is that of Livex, which was a drill to prevent the errors made during the Estonia and Herald of Free Enterprise disasters. Maybe you can remember them. You can read each step of the process here. What is the scenario? What are the goals of my particular role and the evaluation? So you can also see that being a casualty simulation is not without any danger. In the last bullet, I say no play situation. We have an international agreement, which is a safe word, no play. And when there is something really going on, they can stop the scenario and give adequate help. I've done this once doing my software testing. I saw an error in production, and I said, okay, we have a no test situation. And because I had said in the organization no test was a serious situation in production, they could all give commitment and be very quick in resolving the issue, retest a very scoped regression test, and then put the thing in production. And it was all done in a couple of hours. So this could be very useful. And you can see here that it's quite gruesome, but it's also fun, because how many times do you get to be on a power rescue boat on the middle of the sea in full throttle going back to the shore? It's very cool to do. So this is why you're here, and this is the lessons learned. Doing all these kinds of drills gives loads of lessons and can be used in software testing too, as you can see in this slide. I'll share some of these lessons with you in the last part of this webinar. Communication is a pitfall in every drill, but this should be not be very surprising to you. From the Floodex drill, a drill to practice incoming foreign help at huge disasters like a flooding like in the Netherlands in 1953, I got a DVD from which I grabbed some quotes and which you can go read here in the next slide, sorry. Besides some very brilliant quotes, like we learned much more from the few things that go wrong than from the many that pass without a glitch, most of these quotes are regarding communication. So let me show them. In software testing, we are not always aware that we speak a jargon that isn't always understood by our stakeholders or even other testers. I recommend using translators when engaging in meetings where each party has his own jargon and has difficulty to let go of that jargon. So you can use somebody who has some knowledge of testing and some knowledge of, for example, insurances. And they could be a translator between people who are very into insurance and don't know anything about testing, and testers who don't know anything about insurance. And this way you can translate, and valuable information is not lost. So one of the next lessons I have, and this is quite an odd situation, is checklisting is very useful. Not only useful, but a simple tool that can prevent crucial mistakes. In a hospital, an accidental switch was made from the left to the right 9 times a year. By introducing a so-called timeout protocol, which is a checklist which is used in presence of the patients, the switch can be prevented now only to 1 time in 2 years. A switch is made and investigations then show that the checklist isn't used. Let me show a checklist. In software testing, a checklist is also very valuable. It seems, however, that the checklist is perceived as so simple, not high-tech enough or something. I'd like to plea here that a checklist should be a real part of the software testing process or work. It is, just like in the medical profession, a valuable tool that can prevent crucial mistakes. And it only will have to take a minute, and you can ask all these types of short questions. Have we thought of that? Have you thought of that? It only takes a minute, but it can really be very valuable. So one of the other lessons, and maybe some of you recognize these pictures, These are from the aircraft disasters on Tenerife in 1977. And the story was that a Pan Am aircraft landed on the KLM aircraft by part of error of the KLM craft. The highly decorated captain of the KLM aircraft was in a hurry and made a mistake. And the co-pilot saw this mistake made, but was so in awe of his superior in the hierarchy that he didn't say anything. And if he had used the speak up principle, this might have been prevented disaster. So what is speak up? Speak up is a powerful tool. It's speaking questions and thoughts out loud so that other people get triggered by it and can readjust actions if needed and are aware of their actions. I myself find this mandatory part of teamwork, especially when hierarchy is imminent. You must set speak up as mandatory and reward usage of it. Take as long as you need to make it common practice. You will see that it will benefit your testing process really, really, really huge way. So these are just some lessons that I've learned during casualty simulation. I can go on and on and on about this, but yeah, I have some. If you look at casualty simulation, you can find some images and some movies probably on the internet. But I like to keep this a short one. So this is the summary. I've summarized the key message of my presentation in these slides. Casualty simulation is unusual testing. There's nothing very different by testing first aid personnel and testing software. Being aware that communication, jargon, and terminology. Checklisting is a very powerful tool. It's not just low tech, but it's low tech, but it is very powerful. So we shouldn't be saying, okay, this isn't a very high tech solution, so it's maybe minor to use. Just make a checklist and make it work for you. Speak up. It should be mandatory stuff. Just let them ask questions. Maybe you're having a bad day, and by speaking up, you can prevent errors being made. Added benefits, the stuff that adds. And I haven't mentioned this before because it was in my original longer presentation, but added benefits, we know this from the fishermen in the Netherlands. It's actually like when you're fishing for herring and you find some very tasty soles there, and you say, okay, I can eat that one too. So you have some added benefits. And this is also in software testing. We are so close to the software that we sometimes find things that could be very useful for the organization, and we shouldn't keep quiet, but we should say, okay, I have found this stuff that could be beneficiary to your process, and you should use that. Not mentioned at all is no gain at all. So software testing processes can be used in another environments as well as other environments can be an inspiration in software testing. So be inspired by your hobbies and let your hobbies inspire your work. You find that you have very much passion in the things you do in your daily work and your hobbies. We learn more from a few things that go wrong than from the many that pass without a glitch. And you should always emphasize the ones that pass without a glitch too. The more real life, the better the results. It requires skills, preparation, and in Lotus, it requires domain knowledge. If you want more information, you can mail me at Nathalie van Delft at capgemini.com. And there's also some sites about casualty simulation in Europe, and you can also find them in the US, although they don't have these organizations, but are more like courses for doing casualty simulation. So this concludes my webinar. So if you have any questions, you can use the Q&A panel on your web meeting panel.
Thanks very much, Nathalie. That was a great presentation. Now, if anybody has any questions, please enter them now using the Q&A tab on the live meeting toolbar or by pressing Alt and Q on your keyboard. Now, while we're waiting for questions, I just would like to talk to you quickly about our Eurostar blog and our newsletter. We are always seeking articles for both, so if anybody is interested in submitting, please contact me. So you can email me at Miriam, M-I-R-I-A-M, @eurostarconferences.com. Now, let's see, do we have any questions? Now, we have one from Stephen. Can you see that, Nathalie?
Question, yeah, I see one.
Yes. He's
So what
asking,
sort of things do you put in your checklist? Well, for instance, I have a couple of checklists. I have high-level checklists for my testing process in general, but I also have checklists for setting up, for example, exploratory testing. So you can put something in your checklist that has value for you. You should think of something. You put value into your checklist, what works for you. And your team, of course. So in my checklist, there's something like, have I thought of the tester environment? Have I checked with the business? So these are all very common things we all know, which are actually, we have thought of it before, but to write them down and just have them checked will help you not forget in future things. So it's actually everything. You can put anything in a checklist, but it should add value to your own process.
Okay, thanks very much, Nathalie. We don't seem to have any more questions right now, but if you think of one and you'd like it answered, you can email it to me, Miriam, @eurostarconferences.com, and I will forward it on to Nathalie. So thanks to everybody for attending today, and we also have another Eurostar webinar tomorrow taking place at 2 p.m. CET with Nancy Kellen. And Nancy will be speaking about the task of leading business testers, and you can register for this webinar by visiting our homepage. So you can also continue the conversation on Twitter by following us at ESConfs. That's ESCONFS. And if you would like to register for this year's conference, please visit our website for more details. Finally, I'd like to remind you all that this webinar has been recorded, and we will email you once it is available in the Eurostar webinar archive. Thank you for listening. This webinar has now ended.
One moment, please. One moment. I still have one question from Rainer.
No problem, Nathalie.
Can I answer that one?
You can, of course.
Was there a particular event in my past, which triggered that our interest in casualty victim test? Well, actually, I was very fascinated by those people. I did my own first aid lessons, and I was fascinated by the people who were running into the classroom and helped me by learning first aid. And I was this is a great job to do. And I like B-horror movies also, so I could actually combine two of my favorite things, first aid and B-horror movies. So that is actually, it's not an event in my past, it's just a morbid interest, I think.
Thank you very much, Nathalie. We definitely have all those questions answered, but as I said, if you'd like to email me, Miriam, @eurostarconferences.com, and I can forward any more you'll have on to Nathalie. Thank you very much, Nathalie.
Okay, thank you, and have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye.